Welcome, everyone. This is Imagine All the People podcast, where we learn to appreciate our experiences and cherish the bond we have as human beings. I'm your host, Daniel, and today I had the opportunity to talk to Dimitri, who is a volunteer at Ground Zero during the 9/11 attacks.
Hello, my name is Dimitri, and I was born in Ukraine. And I studied computer science first, but then I applied to an American university in Louisiana and came to Louisiana to study communication. And after that, I moved on with my communication studies to Detroit, Michigan, and that's where I was in September of 2001. To this day, I work in media. I shoot and edit videos. I worked as at a okay. Right now, I live in Toronto, in Canada, and I shoot and edit videos, corporate videos, all kind of freelancing, and this is essentially extension of my studies. I studied for media and I do media now.
And this episode is mainly about your experiences in being a volunteer at Ground Zero during the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So could you tell me a little bit more about being a volunteer? Like, what did you do during your time there?
During 9/11, you should understand that there was no call for volunteers. So essentially, all the volunteers that arrived there, it's sort of is in the name, volunteer. People just go out, reach out because out of their own desire. So I arrived there, and mostly what I did was just do what needs to be done, which is some cargo arrived, some load arrived. You have to unload it. You have to move stuff from one place to the other and move, unload bottles, unload all kind of emergency relevant stuff, gas masks, boots, vests, whatever arrives, you unload it. And then you should also understand that it was a lot of weight. It was essentially those were just the very first days after September 11. It was, I think, day 3, 4, 5 maybe, like this, and the rescue effort, they were coordinated between several government and non-governmental agencies, between Fire Department of New York, between New York Police Department, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, FBI, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. And as you can understand, with the 5 bodies, there was like a lot of bureaucracy and things were going very, very slowly. So there was just a lot of wait for something to do, and mostly, actually, nobody ever asked volunteers to help in any way with the rescue effort, as in directly, climbing through the ruins or something. This never happened. So essentially, volunteers just voluntarily stood around and were on standby in case someone needs, someone, in case those people doing the direct rescue, in case they need any kind of very basic assistance. So it was just figuring out okay, so I'm here, and what do I do next? So I need to occupy my time somehow. So I take gas masks, I walk around, I give them everybody who doesn't wear gas masks before, because I had heard on the radio about the asbestos, and probably not many people paid attention to it, but and so you just go around and give gas masks to people, and as it turned out, because years later, I heard on the news, I read on the internet that people who were assisting in the rescue effort on 9/11, they were dying from these asbestos injuries, long injuries. So it was a serious matter.
And were you affected by asbestos in any way?
I spent just a couple of days there, 3 days max, and I wore gas masks protective mask. I'm not sure it's gas mask. It's like protective mask at all time, and I didn't feel any issues. Never ever since. No, I had X-rays, lungs, and everything, but no, I never had any issues. It's probably more applies to people who spent weeks there or months. Those construction workers or police or fire.
And where were you exactly when you heard about that initial 9/11 attack?
I remember I woke up in my empty room in the dorm because it was just beginning of September, and I just moved in.
And you were in Detroit at this time?
Yeah, I was in Detroit, Wayne State University, and so it was an empty room in the dorm, and the school year just started. I just moved in, so empty apartment. So I just went to my classes, and downstairs I walked out of the elevator, and then there was this TV set in the lobby, and I saw some fire smoke, and it was a Pentagon actually. It wasn't even the World Trade Center, it was Pentagon. And I sort of, I mean, I'm ashamed to admit it, that I sort of dismissed it like yet another fire on TV. I mean, of course, it's horrible, but like it was, I didn't register the relevance of it. Neither did I recognize Pentagon. I just saw the fire, horrible, and then when I went on with my day, and then I arrived at work, and then that's where people told me the planes hit the World Trade Center, and it sort of hit close to home because just a couple of years prior to that, I was in New York. I visited it for the first time, and I saw those towers at night for the first time, and they were certainly a view to behold. Everybody who visits Manhattan for the first time is impressed. So, and I went to the top back then, and I went to the platform. That was 1999. So I spent like almost entire day there. So when they were hit, that sort of was personal.
Okay. And what were the main inspirations that made you want to help out back in the attacks?
Um, what was on the media those days, and what was on the media was, I mean, the 9/11 story was 24/7.
Mm.
All, I mean, you tune into any channel, and for the first week, it was like nonstop, never ending, and you just walk on campus, you listen to your radio, and you're in the middle of that story, and you simply cannot study when event of such magnitude has happened, and essentially history is being made or have been made, and you just want to make yourself somehow relevant to do something about it. And that's the feeling that was shared with other people who I later talked to on the internet in this Reddit answer session. Some people, they said exactly the same. They wanted to come to because they just couldn't stay aside.
Yeah. And how did you get to New York all the way from Detroit?
Well, I had an old rundown car, so I just departed Detroit on one day early in the morning. Meaning, first, of course, I sort of talked to some people I knew in New York, and I found a place to stay in a faraway neighborhood in Brooklyn, actually in a Russian neighborhood, Brighton Beach. And then the moment I had a place to stay, I jumped in the car early in the morning and drove all the way to New York. And I remember as I was driving, those, I'm not sure what they're called, but like on freeways, above freeways, there are those pedestrian overpasses once in a while. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I might be wrong, but I think they're called
Yeah.
footbridges.
So I remember as I was driving to New York, and it was sunset, and on many of those overpasses, people were standing with like American flags and some slogans and some never forget stuff, and there was very suddenly the closer you were coming to New York, the more people were standing at those overpasses, and it was very somehow it was
Yeah.
giving you chills.
And did you find a good place to park?
Well, well, I remember, okay, in this faraway neighborhood, Brighton Beach in Brooklyn, my friend lived there, so he sort of directed me where parking could be found, so there was no issue. But I remember then one night I spent in Manhattan because I met somebody in Manhattan on Ground Zero, and they invited me over to move to them so I could be closer to my sort of say place of work. And that day when I moved over to them, and I had to look for parking in Manhattan. And I remember I parked 17 blocks away. That's the closest I could find.
Got it. Okay. And were there other volunteers along with you who were doing the same thing?
I'm sure there were, because as I read here years later, they sort of identified themselves. Oh, I also was a volunteer. I was a volunteer. And I also met a couple of people there. There was this one guy from Congo. I think he was a student, and no, he didn't come all the way from Congo. He was originally from Congo, but he was a student at New York College. So he was there. I remember his name was Chimsus Jesus. And then there was this some working class looking guy from, I don't know from where he was, but he said that they also came to New York, and they slept in a tent in the park, and he like took my picture, I took his picture. Uh, so I really do not know if there was some organized volunteer effort, because I was probably there for too short of a time to,
Okay.
to inquire about some organized volunteer effort. I just came for a couple of days. I plugged the holes where I could identify those, and I left.
Hmm. And these first responders, the policemen, the firemen, were they appreciative of your presence, or did they kind of dismiss you?
Uh, where they, I didn't really deal with firemen. As for the police, I dealt with the police more because, as you understand, all of the lower Manhattan was cordoned off. It
Hmm.
was, I think, south of Canal Street. Yeah, Canal Street and south of that uh, was closed, and the subway trains would like pass through this area. Nobody would come out on the ground.
Yeah.
And as for the police, I think, I mean, there was no some there was a little bit of a lack of coordination,
Hmm.
because some police would let me through, some police would just turn me back, not let me through. There was no. Uh, some police would just talk normally. Some would
Yeah.
bark at you, but you should also understand that this uh, being in the spotlight, and you having to deal with a lot of people. I'm talking about the police,
Hmm.
and everybody's, I mean, yanking you 10 different ways, and somebody's scaring and somebody passing, and somebody wants to go through and somebody wants to go out. It's like you have to make sense on the spot. You have to make sense out of a big mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It must have been like very chaotic and everything.
Well, it was. Those people were doing a good job making order out of a chaos, but of course, by the nature of the event, chaos was very much there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And when you were there helping out, was the city still in ruins, or what? And what did it look like essentially?
The ground zero,
Yeah.
it was day 4, so essentially it looked absolutely as if it had just collapsed. It was just all this. I don't know if you've ever been to New York.
Hmm.
This World Trade Center Plaza, all this gigantic plaza, simply filled with shards and of scrap metal.
Hmm.
Essentially, it was gigantic pit. I don't know what, 300 feet or 600 feet by 600 feet or even more so, uh, full of just metal. And I remember that I only saw metal, and I didn't really saw much of a concrete, because a lot of
Okay.
concrete just pulverized into the air as the collapse occurred. So, and it was smoking, it was smoldering. I remember I saw this smoke as I was passing across George Washington Bridge from New Jersey to the upper Manhattan, to the not to the upper, to the northern Manhattan, to
Uh-huh.
Harlem, and you could see this smoking, smoldering from all the way like 10 miles away, and the traffic was at a standstill on that bridge, because everybody would like brake to glance that way.
Hmm.
So it was. And yeah, and another thing is, I remember tons and tons of sheets of office documents. They were mostly because, with that cloud of dust, all those papers, those lawyer financial documents, they just flew out the window. You couldn't see it on TV, um, but they flew out of the window, and from the roads, from the streets, from the pavements, they had been mostly cleaned up. But in places where people didn't walk, such as this backyard of that Trinity Church, there's this Trinity Church in Broadway, which
Hmm.
backyard faces the plaza. There, those sheets lay, just the way they fell, and they were like, I think, up to, well, I wouldn't say up to knee, but it was definitely up
Hmm.
to your ankle.
Hmm.
So I imagine that's how a big part of Lower Manhattan was covered by those sheets until they had been cleaned up.
Okay, and was there always a strong smell of smoke while you were helping out?
No, I wouldn't say it was permeating throughout the city because okay, smoke was rising up, and well, you couldn't stay in its path even if you wanted because
Hmm.
you'd have to be in a helicopter hovering over because it was rising up. But you could feel the smell. Yeah, the smell you could feel. Uh, it was pretty much lower to ground zero. Other in other parts of the city, no, I wouldn't say that all the city was full of smoke. No.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you could smell it every, all the time. It,
Hmm. And do you have a specific memory that stuck out during your time at Ground Zero?
a specific memory that struck out during my time at Guard Zero. Um, oh, I no, it was um, no, you're there, and you know, I was coming there, and in my mind, it was of course sort of naive. I was imagining that I'd be somehow actually, on the forefront of maybe rescuing someone. Of course, it was extremely naive and silly to think that. And once you arrive there, you look at this pit and you think maybe there's still some people in there, and can they be rescued? Will they ever be rescued? And is there someone still alive? And then I came closer and I saw those I beams, and they were maybe like, the I beam.
No, sorry. What are I beams?
No, I beam. It's like a railing in the cross section of an eye. It's used in construction. It's essentially like a rail used in construction. I beam. Uh, those I beams, and they were like maybe like an inch thick. Oh, for serious business for building skyscrapers. And
Uh-huh.
those inch thick I beams, they were like torn and twisted in such a way like it tear and twist a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And the moment I saw that, I realized that no, there's like nobody alive.
Hmm.
No, there.
So I'm guessing there must have been a feeling of helplessness as there were so many people under the rubble and you didn't have the power to save all of them.
No, the moment I saw those torn and twisted I-beams, I understood that there's simply nobody left to rescue, and this tornado of steel and concrete. And the biggest permeating feeling was with the surrealness of it.
Hmm.
Um, you just can't. You're just trying to comprehend it, and you keep failing at comprehending. And essentially, you can just stand there for hours on end and just stare at it, and it's never enough because it just you,
Hmm.
you just can't comprehend it. You've never seen it in your life, and yes.
I see.
So that was that.
Yeah. And what was the overall vibe like in the city?
In the city, as I said, I spent 90% of my time on ground zero, and there the vibe was, by the time it was busy, like cleaning it up, like rescuing. I remember there were some people, some either police or fire, yeah, probably police, walking on those ruins with dogs, sniffing dogs.
Hmm.
So there was still some belief about the fact that maybe there is still somebody.
Alive.
Yes, alive. Uh, but mostly, mostly those officials, they were just standing and looking and talking and trying to, I think, plan it, how to, how to deal with it.
Hmm.
There was no, cranes were not working yet, the excavators were not working yet.
Yeah.
There was some machinery, but it wasn't actively working yet. Those officials were mostly deciding.
Hmm.
So this was essentially the down to business spirit there, and also, of course, there were a lot of those corners and walls and shrines or the the vigil sites. I'm not sure what you call where with the American flags and flowers and people signing cards and never forget and
Hmm.
photographs of lost people and photographs of World Trade Center and so in those places people were like talking more,
Hmm.
and also in the city here and there. I remember Lexington. I think it was Armory in Lexington and 26, or maybe some other street. I could be mistaken, but Armory was made into a wall where people posted pictures of the missing ones,
Yeah.
and the whole building was full of pictures. Also, when I was traveling home one night from first night, I think from Ground Zero, and I was in the workers' garb in the city municipal, not in
Mm.
city munis. I was looking like city municipal worker, but in fact I was in a hunter's jacket because that's the only thing I could find in Walmart that looked sort of, you know, sort of like light reflecting safety jacket.
Yeah.
So I remember in the subway, people started thanking me, and I was like, I didn't really do anything. I just stood there and unloaded some water and waited. And, okay, people thanking me. Okay, well, trying best. And also some places there would be like vigil sites. I remember one guy on the I forgot which location it was, but maybe somewhere in Greenwich Village. I'm not good at New York geography. He was on the ground and drawing those twin towers on the ground, and there were candles and flowers and people standing around looking at him. And yeah, well, other than that, mm, lots of you know, a lot of the city area was going on its business, and maybe everybody was thinking and keeping it in the back of their mind, but it's New York, so New York has to go on its business. Yeah.
And I'm just curious, how did you guys get to eat while you were helping out? Were there restaurants open or were there people donating food?
To eat, okay, I remember two places. One place there was this cafe, not cafe, eatery under blue tarp or under green tarp. It was on mm, it was on the south side of World Trade Center Plaza, and there were some volunteers working and cooking, and inside there were benches and tables, and that's where firemen and police eat. And that's where volunteers could come and eat. No, for free, of course, because it was volunteer effort. That was one place. Another place was there was this subway exit right near the back of Trinity, near the backyard of the Trinity Church in World Trade Center Plaza. There was this subway exit, and by that exit there was this huge pile of goods donated from, I don't know, from the city or from entire country, starting helmets, and maybe there was food. I don't remember, but there was also one place in Siemens Church Institute that was sort of like a headquarters of volunteers, and they also fed us there. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. And have you ever been back to New York since helping out in 9/11?
Yes, I've been several times, and of course, every time I come there, I'm drawn to that place.
Mm-hmm.
First time I came there, and arrived, it was already just a gigantic pit, cleaned totally. It was maybe 2 years after it happened. It was just a pit, nothing there. Then a couple of years later, some construction. Several years later, already this, I don't know,
This
Freedom,
memorial.
Liberty Tower
Yeah.
erected. And this recent time was in New York a couple of years ago. Um, mm, well, I think the plaza was already completely finished, and those two reflection ponds in place of the towers, and this there's this museum which I didn't happen to see because I came to the plaza late in the
Mhm.
evening. It was already closed by then, but next time I'm there, I'm definitely visiting there.
So I would probably guess that you have a very different perspective of New York City after helping out during the 9/11 attacks. So when you visited the city afterwards, did you have a different mental image as to what a certain area looked like while you were helping out?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's just you should remember that the plaza it just was made so unrecognizable. It's not like they recreated it.
Mm-hmm.
Had they recreated, had they rebuilt in the same spot, it would have been more. It would have been more easy to recognize. But they essentially remodeled the whole thing, and it takes some time even for me to figure out where things were. But yeah, I remember here here's where the goods were. Here's where the morgue was. Here is here's where the cafe was. Here's where I was barked by the policeman at. And yes, of course, those memories they last.
Mm-hmm. I know that you lived in Detroit while the 9/11 attacks happened, and I personally know that Detroit has a very large Muslim population. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just wondering what was the dynamics like between the city and the Muslim population there.
Oh, okay. I cannot say at large. I can only. I mean, I cannot say in general. I cannot, draw some uh, wide-ranging conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
But from my experience, I just know two things. I lived right on the street where this um, Muslim cultural center was. It was
Yeah.
on Cass Avenue and Forest, intersection of those two streets. And I remember that in the days following the attack, somebody smashed the windows there. I remember that. And also, second thing, well, it's not really about Detroit, but as I was living in New York, leaving New York
Mm-hmm.
after my 3 days there, I remember hearing on the radio that some uh, Indian Punjabi guy, Sikh guy, was killed somewhere in Arizona because apparently um, someone mistook him for a Muslim because of his turban.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those two things I remember
Okay.
as far as backlash against Muslims concerned. I mean, some something large scale in Detroit. No, I don't remember that ever happening.
Okay. And what are your current views on multiculturalism?
What my views on Malta? Well, this is the question that I'm least qualified to answer. Uh, it's not. It's not like my direct experience. Of course, well, actually, I probably do have a direct experience because I'm an immigrant to North America, but I simply don't have anything to compare it to because, you know, I do not have another Dimitri uh, who is native born Northern American, and so I could compare my experiences to his. But as for multicultural, well, this is such a loaded question because the world is over the past 50 years with development in transportation and
Mm-hmm.
communication, the world became so much closer and so much more intertwined, and it's getting even more so that multiculturalism, well, it's bound to happen, exchange of cultures, mix of cultures. Um, um, I mean, what my view is, I'm accepting of, you know what, the more I live, the more I realize that you have to differentiate not between like people from your country and other people, or people of your color and other people, you have to separate for yourself smart, kind, intelligent, decent people and those who are not. And smart, kind, intelligent, decent people, it doesn't really matter where they're from, your country, not your country. This is the this is the distinction that I just understand, I appreciate more and more.
Got it.
What
Okay.
really matters.
Yeah, definitely. And how has helping out in Ground Zero helped you understand humanity as a whole?
On humanity as a whole, again, loaded question. Uh, those questions, they require to sort of sit down and think and write. Not 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 good at answering impromptu. Well, as humans, we are very limited in the sense. I mean, on top of the obvious thing that it was a great tragedy and greatest, or one of the greatest acts of terror in the history. Uh, on top of this, which is certainly understood by itself, I think we as humans are very limited in our perception and in our relevancy, because we essentially can act upon what hits close to home,
Mm.
and things that don't hit close, like this hit close to home, so I packed and went there. But things that don't hit close to home, we simply they're just as relevant for humanity at large, but they are not relevant for us. And acts of terrors that happen overseas in other countries. Something that happens close to home, it gets like a front page on CNN in red letters for days on end. Something of the same scales that happens in somewhere overseas in, I don't know, Pakistan or Africa, it gets some brief mentioning
Yeah.
down there in the basement of a CNN page. So what I'm leading is at times it can be frustrating when you feel powerless, helpless, when you understand that right this moment people could be dying not just close to home but elsewhere, and you're essentially helpless, powerless to help them because you cannot be everywhere at the same time. Um, as a humanity as a whole, well, it's the golden rule that Jesus spoke, that do unto others uh, as you wish others to do
Upon
upon
you,
you.
yeah.
I mangled it. Do upon others the way you wish others do upon yourself. Um, so this stays the golden rule, and nothing better has yet invented. It's the ability to for empathy, right? And very often people just don't empathize. They don't have empathy. The a lot of people, mostly people, are driven by instant gratification. Instant gratification versus delayed gratification. Instant gratification, where you essentially you reach some kind of your goal quickly at the expense of others, and delayed gratification is you sort of think more in the larger term of what is good for us as a
In
society,
general.
as a community.
Yeah.
And only very advanced, so to say, enlightened people are able to think in delayed gratification mostly. Lots of people think in terms of instant gratification, and for as long as it happens, I mean, we'll still be having problems between people and conflict and all kind of man-made problems.
And just before we end, What is one specific lesson that you would like to share after helping out at Ground Zero?
Well, I remember when I went to volunteer, I had to skip some classes, obviously. So some of my professors were angry at me because they were saying, I understand how it's so much more exciting to be in the middle of it all than to stay in class. And but I still risked some. I don't know what I risked. Bad grades, expulsion, maybe not expulsion, but maybe bad grades and falling behind. I risked that to go and to do what I did and to see what I saw. And I guess sometimes you have to take some risks if you want to. Sometimes you have to play a little bit against the rules if you feel really strong about what you want to do.
And that just about closes up our episode. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Dimitri.
You're welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much for listening to Imagine All the People podcast. This was Dimitri, and we hope you join us for the next episode.